So Angela is the founder of Angela R. Howard Consulting, and she's been a 15-year career working with executives, founders, and leaders to actualize their organizational cultures for the collective impact of the organizations, employees, and the communities they serve. And we also ask, like, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A function, or even throughout, the conversation, type in the chat as well. And there's react functions below. And at the end, if you'd like to come on stage with us, you can use the raise hand function and we can have a conversation there. And with that, Angela, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining. I hope the morning sessions have been insightful and energizing, and really looking forward to talking to you today about how to polish your leadership mentality. We're going to talk about a lot of concepts today, and I'm going to share my screen here just so we can get kicked off. So help me out. If you can see my screen, just give me a thumbs up or a happy face or something that tells me that you can see my screen. Okay, awesome. Thank you again, everybody, for joining. You already heard a little bit about me. I just want to give you a little bit more context as to why I'm here and the lens from which I come from, the lived experiences that have helped me be able to be a thought leader around this topic. So again, my name is Angela Howard, and I'm grateful to be in your space today. I've spent my 15-year career applying my organizational psychology background in a variety of roles, ranging from, in our field, right? There's like a million different titles that we can call ourselves, but ranging from chief HR officer, chief people officer, to head of people, talent, and culture, all the buzzwords. But I now have my own business, which is focused on helping companies build and transform into more human-centric, sustainable cultures. So my academic background is actually in organizational psychology. So I use the lens of behavior, mindset shift to actually help organizations get from point A to point B when it comes to building culture and culture change. And so today we're going to be talking about leadership, and specifically around this idea of impact leadership and building your leadership mentality. And so I want to start with a question. Just humor me for 30 seconds here. I want to ask you, who counts on you? Just think about that question. Who counts on you? And I want you to just put it in the chat. You could also mouth it out, write it down, but think about that question. Who counts on you day to day? It could be your team. It could be your family. It could be your fur baby. Who counts on you? And I want you to also think about the type of emotions you feel when you were answering that question. Was it pride? Was it love? Was it humanity, empathy, commitment, care? All those things, have emotions tied to them. And I believe that emotion is leadership, natural leadership in its purest state. And for some reason along the way, we got lost. We started thinking of leadership as a construct around power, aggression, absolute, black and white, winner, loser. These are all words that we tend to connect with traditional leadership. And so the challenge I have today around what we're going to talk about, which is impact leadership, this is all about getting back to the basics and getting back to service to each other, because that's what leadership is. And whether it's your family, your team, your dog, your house plant, I'm looking at the chat right now and seeing some of the things you put in the chat here, your chosen family, Christopher. We all have an opportunity to lead differently and shed what we're taught about traditional leadership, because there is a new kind of leadership emerging, as you all know, as this whole conference and summit is about. And so I want to challenge us to say, you can be kind and clear. being an empathetic leader doesn't mean you have to be one or the other, right? You can be vulnerable and courageous all at the same time. And you can do all of this without having a formal position of leadership. Leadership is more about a mindset, how you're interacting with people. It's a mentality. And that's really what we're going to talk about today is how do you start to think about yourself as a leader in these different multi-hyphenated situations that you put yourself in your career, but also your life. And so this gets me to the concept, let's unpack this a little bit of what is the leadership mentality. And like I said, it is a mindset, not a position. When we think about leadership, we oftentimes think about the person in charge. But we're missing a piece of the puzzle here if we're only thinking about this as someone in a position or org chart, because leadership is a state of mind and a mentality that has little to do with a position. It has more to do with the impact and the influence, and specifically the positive influence you're having on others. And at its core, again, I love the term service to others because that is what leadership is about. And so, as a modern leader, as a leader who is working towards supporting the future workforce, there are three elements that I've identified that are crucial to your growth and your journey as a leader. And this is what I call the leadership mentality. Think about this as a model of sorts or a guiding post as to how we start to polish this skill set. And it starts with internal awareness and the courage to reflect, to iterate, and improve. And it ripples out into impacting the people you serve and eventually the communities you will impact by connecting and positively influencing the people you serve. And so we posted a link to a worksheet that, we have limited time together today. We're only together for 40 minutes. And this is really a lifelong journey. So I wanted to make sure you all had something to take back with you after this 40-minute session to really do some journaling, some reflection on how you can start to think about this as a skill set that you could build over time. But be sure to access that worksheet and print it out after the session or follow along today as we're working through the session. So let's start with some self-awareness and some courage. Let's really dig in deep because it does start with us. And I just want to acknowledge that leadership is fucking hard. And excuse my language. I think we're all adults here. It's okay. We can curse. We can let loose a little bit, right? But leadership is hard and it's frustrating and it's draining at times because when you serve others, you're always looking in the mirror constantly. You always have a reflection um, back at you, telling you what you should and should not be doing, and then you have to improve that and work on that. It's hard, and so which is why the internal self reflective nature of leadership is an ongoing lifelong journey. Really, it's not like you arrive. You don't really just you know arrive and you're done. You're constantly working on your leadership and on your leadership mentality. And so I like to say that you kind of pick up little pebbles along the way. You pick up skills, experiences, what not to do. I mean, a lot of my leadership and the way I've thought about my leadership has been, unfortunately, being exposed to bad leaders and saying, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the opposite of that. But everything you learn about leadership will be conducive to the way you want to lead and show up authentically, which is a really important piece of this, which is, you know, your ability to put some of your personality and your own approach to things. I think a lot of times we sometimes have a persona of leadership and it kind of ties to traditional leadership. And so what I'm challenging you with is how am I going to show up differently? How can I change, kind of break down that paradigm of leadership and show up in my own way, in my own beautiful, brilliant, diverse way. And then just to get into some logic here, fun fact about leadership, your brain doesn't like it. We talk about natural born leaders. And by the way, I'm in the camp that leadership, it can be nurtured versus, that you're born with it or you're not born with it. So I want you to take a moment, though, to think about what the brain is wired to do. Why would I say that your brain doesn't like the concept of leadership? Why would I say that? What is your brain wired to do? And go ahead and just put in the chat your thoughts. What is the brain wired to do? Keep you safe. Yeah, that's great. What else? What is the brain wired to do? What is it? Why does it exist? And I'm going to get really primal here, but at its core, it is meant to keep you alive, right? It's developed to help you survive, and survival is selfish. Survival is naturally selfish. So of course our threats are different, right? We're not going back to the caveman and woman days. We're not fending off saber-toothed tigers or a sandstorm or something like that. We're fending off difficult colleagues. We're fending off our egos being hurt. There's different things that we're seen as threats in the workplace. But our brain is a self-serving mechanism and it runs to keep us safe and alive. So I want you to now take a moment to think about what is the function of leadership. I said it earlier, but what's the function of leadership? It's selfless. It's meant to be selfless. And so this is one of the reasons why leadership is considered a skill that we have to consistently work at. We have to consistently combat biases. We have to consistently um, combat our own tendencies in order to better serve other people. And so you have to work at it just like another muscle. You got to keep it fit. You got to keep the skill set going and learning. And that's why we're attending sessions like these so we can open up our mind and have a growth mindset and learn how we can be of better service to others. And that is the future of work. Is empathetic leadership and human-centric leadership. And so I want you to take a few moments, and maybe this is a good opportunity to, if somebody wanted to come up on stage, but I want to hear from you all your thoughts on how you've used your own leadership practice. And when I say leadership practice, again, I'm not just talking about your team. This could be how you're serving your community, your church, your family. How are you putting humans at the center of that practice? And feel free to write in the chat, or if you want to come on stage and share some thoughts or some tactics with the group. Yeah, Carrie mentioned really like the survival versus leadership and what it does to the brain. Yeah, that's a great point. If we are wired to be selfish and fight for our survival every day and manage threats, leadership again is a tendency that we have to work at. We have to work on that skill set just like another muscle. Anybody want to come on stage to talk about human-centric leadership, how you're putting humans at the center of your leadership practice? If not, we can wait until the end. I'll just give it a few more seconds. All right, we'll move on. So this gets me to another part of leadership, which is the team, right? So a lot of you are managing teams. A lot of you are working in teams as a community. And this is a concept and a part of our leadership that we really have to think about applying to a collective group. So we can manage ourselves, right? And even managing ourselves is hard. We have to manage and develop the leadership muscle, but how do you actually apply it to a team to actually formulate a climate of care and formulate a climate that's safe for people to look to you as a leader, to see you for direction and for guidance? How do you create that environment? And so, not that I'm going to get into a history lesson because I am not a historian, but this is Aristotle. Maybe you recognize him. And he's a great philosopher. And again, I'm not mentioning this because I'm giving you a history lesson, but because there's some popular research on team effectiveness and leadership that bears his name. And so in 2015, Google conducted a research project called Project Aristotle. This project was launched to discover the most impactful drivers of successful teams. And it uncovered that the number one factor in determining the effectiveness of a team was a concept called psychological safety. And some of you may have heard this, it's kind of become a buzzword, but the concept of psychological safety is essentially that I feel safe being authentically myself without retribution of my team, my leader, my colleagues, my leader's leader, the company. I can express myself authentically, ask questions, provide my input, use my lived experiences to provide feedback. And so this is some of the themes that are emerging around how to be a better leader. And this is kind of a quote from Amy Edmondson, which many of you may have heard of. She is a thought leader in the area of psychological safety. And so in this research study, what they discovered was that even the extremely smart, high-powered employees at Google needed a psychologically safe work environment to contribute the talents that they had to offer. The team also found 4 other factors that helped explain team performance. Things like, are the goals clear? Do I have dependable colleagues? Do I have meaningful work? And then a belief that fundamentally work has impact. So this research is proving itself and validating itself over and over again. And so I want you to think about your role as a leader. How are you creating clear goals? How are you empowering your team or the people around you? How are you giving people meaningful work? Even in family life, right? These things are so important. And I think we forget that our family is team number one. And you have to kind of work within this concept of psychological safety as well in any unit, in any team, any family unit that you are leading or you're a part of. And so again, this is kind of a reflection question. This is in the workbook, in the worksheet that we provided, but think about, how are you creating cognitive ease and psychological safety for the people you serve today? What can you stop or start doing to be more people-centric? Because again, humans like to process things a certain way. We like things that are clear. We like to have control over our environment. These are all human-centric elements that we have to remember if we are leading or we're guiding a team or a group of people. And so any thoughts from you all as to how you're building psychological safety with the people you serve? Any tips, tricks, tactics, or things you've heard of that have that kind of speak to this? Building better humans rather than employees. Yes, a holistic human experience, right? I think we forget sometimes that the people who are working for us are not machines. They're humans with background, experiences, lived experiences. They've got good days, they've got bad days. And so as a leader, again, leader being not a team leader necessarily, but someone who is seeing themselves as serving others, we have to understand the holistic human experience. So great point, Carrie. Thank you for mentioning that. All right, so the last part of the leadership mentality is the we. So we talked about the me, we talked about the team, and now we're talking about the we. And this is really about, how are you thinking about your impact as a ripple effect, right? So Carrie mentioned earlier about really seeing people as humans. And the thing I like to say most often when it comes to human-centric leadership is, as leaders, as anyone who is positively impacting another human being, we are at work, especially, we have this container, right? Where we're there 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, however many hours you work. But we're influencing this human being in this container, and then we're releasing them out into the world. They're going back to their communities. They're going back to society. They're going back to their families. what is the impact we're making on them? And I think having the realization that we have an impact is so important, because leadership is not just about delegating to people or telling people what to do, or again, a name on an org chart or having power. It's literally about the experience you're creating for other people so that they can ripple affect that into their communities and society and other communities that they're a part of. So we have such an influence as leaders and as serving other people. And so I wanted to kind of demonstrate this idea of belonging. Community and belonging go hand in hand. And with the emergence of a more hybrid workforce, we're also seeing an important theme emerge around things like employee engagement. And this is the idea of belonging. You all have heard about DE&I. I like to remind folks that DE&I is not a separate strategy or initiative. It's about how you are actively including different people in decision making. It's about how you are creating, again, going back to psychological safety, how you are creating an environment that is psychologically safe so everyone can contribute their best ideas. And that has business impact, but it also has impact on the individuals that work with you. And that's where belonging comes in. When people have a sense of belonging, they are more likely to connect with your purpose and your mission. When people have a sense of belonging, they're more likely to be engaged and passionate about what you're looking to build together. And this concept of belonging has emerged recently, especially in 2022, as a top driver of employee engagement. And this was the first year where it rose so high to the surface. I'm quoting this source from Qualtrics. Qualtrics is an experience management platform in business. They do an annual study about the top drivers of employee engagement and employee experience. So they have tons of data from around the world from all these different organizations that they work with. And last year, belonging and DE&I bubbled to the top of the surface. So your ability as a leader to create community, to develop community, and to think about ways that perhaps exclusion is happening and turning into inclusive opportunities to get a diverse group of people together that share a topic or a mission that you're looking to accomplish together is a really important aspect of being a leader in the future of work. And just to quote Brene Brown, she does a ton of research around psychological safety, but also the influence of courage and speaking up and inclusion within organizations. And she mentions here that one of the biggest surprises in her research was learning that fitting in and belonging are not the same thing. In fact, fitting in is one of the greatest barriers to belonging. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be in order to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. And so I think that's so telling, this idea of belonging versus fitting in. It's not about how comfortable with. It's about learning and unlearning different experiences, but making sure you have the diverse voices in the room to solve complex, meaty problems. And so as a leader, one of the things you have to think about is how are you intentionally building a diverse community that can help you solve challenges? And again, it could be like a big challenge at work, or it can be, where are we going to go on a family vacation? These are all things you need diverse perspectives and to create community and belonging around. And so again, a question to reflect on: what communities do you have influence? Where are the opportunities that you can use to build community and increase belonging in the areas where you have a platform? We all have a platform. And again, it could be a small platform, it could be a really big platform, but we all have a platform. We all have pockets of influence that we can build community around. Anybody can do it, whether you're a people leader, you're managing a team or not. And so we're going to wrap up here. I really want to answer your questions. I want to have some discussion around this during our last 8 minutes or so. But just a quick recap. I always like to recap these talks with just, if you weren't listening the whole time, at least you'll learn something within the next minute. And this is my hot 10 recap of today's talk. The first thing is, do be authentically yourself and be empathetic towards others. We're all human. We're all human. And I think Carrie mentioned earlier, but we bring our human experiences to work. Don't wait for anyone else to tell you that you're an expert or a leader. I know we didn't touch on this a ton during this chat, but I want to remind you of that. Nobody needs to tell you you're a thought leader or you're a leader or you're an expert in your space. Use your voice to provide a different perspective. The third thing is, do reflect often and have the courage to change. I cannot tell you how many mistakes I've made in my leadership journey. Ton of mistakes, but I've learned from every single one of them. And I've had the courage to say, you know what, that I'm receiving the feedback on that, and I know what I need to do to change it. And I acknowledge I need to change it. So there's a little bit of learning and unlearning as we work through this journey. Don't see leadership as an end game. You're never going to arrive. I hate to tell you that, but you're never going to arrive. It's an ongoing journey. Do seek out examples of leadership stories that inspire you. Use this community that you've hopefully built at Social HR Camp to talk about leadership stories, to talk about how you're using your influence. Don't be silent when you see others who are not able to or who are scared to speak up. Protect the psychological safety of others. So leadership moves like this one actually bring things to life, like how are you creating an inclusive environment? It's not just about talking about it, you have to actually do it. Do what you can to create psychologically safe spaces. Set the environment up, create clarity, empower other people's voices, bring diversity to the table. Don't underestimate the power of your leadership and influence. Again, all of us have a platform. Figure out that platform, what communities you're a part of, and use those spaces to create change. Do embrace your differences and use them as an opportunity to create positive change. You bring a different perspective to the room. And so use it. Just because you have a different perspective actually means you are a key asset within that conversation. And then lastly, don't forget the positive change you can make regardless of your position. Regardless of your position, if you're following this idea of the leadership mentality and the impact on others as the definition of leadership, just know that you can make an impact. And so I would love to hear your questions. This is my information. If you ever want to reach out, connect. I love hearing from the community. Again, I'm a huge believer of, influencing change through community. So please reach out to me. My email's here, my website's here. Get in touch with me on social. I'd love to hear from you all. But what questions do you have? What's on your mind?
All right. Thank you, Angela, for sharing with us so many great nuggets of insight today. And yes, so I just kindly invite everyone, if you have any questions or comments, to just post into the chat. But as you're coming up with these questions, I have one for myself as well.
Oh,
so I was
awesome.
curious. So you said that we shouldn't wait to start to be a leader or to lead or to have that. So then how would you lead without having that traditional title or without having a team?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So, leadership comes in many forms. So one thing that comes to mind instantly is, how are you being an integrator at your company? How are you bringing the right people together to solve tough challenges? That doesn't take a title of leadership to get people in a room and say, okay, I'm working on this project. I acknowledge this needs your voices. And how are you compiling the different perspectives around the problem you're looking to solve? Doesn't require a leadership title. Speaking up for others, right? Including people in the room. When you're in a room and you're talking about, I don't know, diversity, equity, inclusion, and there's no diverse voices in the room, raising your hand and saying, hey, I really think we should, include some other perspectives here. That's leadership. being a mentor, being a sponsor for somebody within your organization. These are all things that you can actively do that are really empowering. And honestly, these things fill my cup up. My heart always tends to swell when I get a chance to mentor somebody or sponsor somebody or speak up for somebody. And it doesn't require you to have a position of authority or a leadership title.
Thanks for sharing, Angela. And I'm really curious as well. I think like other things where people um, like may conflate like what leadership like looks like and what it actually is. Like what I'm trying to ask is
Hmm.
sometimes with the best intentions, like you may do something, but then it actually creates like an adverse impact. And so I think under the realm of leadership,
Mm.
do you think there are maybe some actions that people do or like buzzwords, things that, on paper sound great, but in reality, it's like, well, maybe just reconsider, maybe reframe.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we talk a lot about things like leadership presence and executive presence, and those words drive me a little nutty, to be honest, because it's like, whose standards are we talking about here? And so I think you have to be bold enough to trust your gut a little bit. As a leader, there are people we look up to. There's frameworks. But the key is just like everything else, internalize it in your own lens. So if you were looking to be a more empathetic leader, things like delegating, for example, that's a buzzword, right? Like delegate, delegate, delegate. Okay, but are you delegating in a way where you're checking for understanding? Are you delegating in a way where you're providing clarity and checking in on people? Do you have the notion of just because it makes sense to me, it may not make sense to somebody else? Like that's the EQ piece of leadership that we have to start to integrate in. Because our brains love clarity. And if you're not providing clarity to your team or to whatever community you're working with, people are going to be confused and they're going to be frustrated and they're not going to see you as a leader. They're going to see you as just a person who's disseminating information. And so I think putting your own spin to things, using your gut and your intuition, especially if you have high EQ already and you're already an empathetic leader, is really important because most of the books on leadership are traditional at this point. We're seeing a wave of people publishing new research and articles and information, but we have to put our own spin to it because it's the world needs it right now. I hope
I
that answers your
feel
question.
Thank you so much. No, I feel you 100%. Like the traditional model isn't working as we're seeing, and it's time to be in this transformative space, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Totally. I do want to open up the floor. If anyone else has any questions or comments that you'd like to share with Angela, I thought your reflection questions you shared earlier were like really great too. So now I want to go back and actually like think about it more through your worksheet.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And that's why I always like to provide that because 40 minutes together just isn't enough, right? Like you need that reflection time. And I'm the type of person who I journal every day and I always need writing prompts to do reflection. And so hopefully if you all are the same way, maybe this will be an opportunity for you to do some reflection and some application, right? Like what's the one to two things you're going to do differently coming out of this session? That's something else you can think about.
Yes,
Make
totally.
capturing the learning.
And then I also wanted to ask you as well, which I think you also kind of touched on, but why
Mhm.
is human-centered leadership so important right now?
Yeah, I think it's important because first of all, it's a long time coming. I think for a very long time, in during the Industrial Revolution, a lot of concepts, a lot of traditional workplace concepts were developed, right? And those concepts were developed for a small group of people. And we have to start thinking about leadership from a diversity perspective and working with um, diverse employees, diverse communities. And we also need to think about what employees are expecting in the future of work, which is I'm no longer going to work for a company with shitty culture. I'm no longer going to work for the command and control boss. I want to work with people who treat me like a human being, which is what I am. And during the pandemic, I think a lot of people have been doing some reevaluation of what work actually means to them. You don't have to go to work and be drained by the end of the day. Work can be an integrated part of your life, and it could be a purposeful, energizing part of your life. People are realizing this is a possibility, and we've been kind of, I don't know, kind of scammed, over the last few generations to think that everything has to be so industrial and sterile about work. And so that's why I think it's really important, is because people are coming to the realization that they're empowered and their talent is needed within businesses, not the other way around necessarily. So now is the time.
Yeah, no, totally. I feel you 100%. And we're seeing so many conversations about that. Like remote work isn't really um, exceptional anymore. Like it's the norm. And it's
Mm,
so quickly past couple of years. And even the conversation around a 4-day work week, for instance, just
yeah.
new ways of thinking about working. I wanted to add one last question real quick from the audience. This is from Sydney.
Hey, Sydney.
The question is, as a leader, why is it so important to reflect on how we lead? Sydney, would you like to join us on stage as well? Could you raise your hand? Just let me know. But maybe Angela, as Sydney tells us, whether or not they're comfortable to join. Okay, they're comfortable to join. Let's have you on as well.
Hi everyone.
Hi, Sydney.
Hi. Yeah, so I know like right now I think with COVID we all been doing a lot of self-reflection, and then as leaders we have to do a lot of self-reflection and step back and be like, what kind of leader do we want to be? So why is
Mm.
it's important to reflect?
Yeah, it's so important to reflect. I think, first of all, there's a kind of a self-regulation part of leadership, which is we have to be
Mhm.
really mindful. We have to be really mindful of our emotions and how we process things, because again, going back to that brain and what is our brain meant to do? It's
Mhm.
defaulting to survive, and so when we're under attack, when we're under crisis or a threat, we are going to go back to our natural tendency, which is oftentimes to protect. Like
Mhm.
I am going to go internally when leadership is about being external. It's about working with other people, being able to collaborate and to read other people and have EQ. So I think if we are able to know how we reflect on how we act in that default state, like
Mm.
when you're under
Mhm.
crisis, like what do you go to? And then how do we interact? How do we lead in our at our best? I think if we begin to learn those two things over time, we can inch towards being able to regulate ourselves to be the best leader we can. And again, like I said, it is a lifelong journey. You're never going to be all the way on the other side. You're still going to have these defaults that you
Mhm.
naturally, go back to. But I think if you're reflecting and understanding it, just like anything else you're looking to improve, any muscle you're trying to build, it's monitoring and iterating as you go.
Awesome. Thank you, Angela.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great question, Sydney. Thanks for asking it.
All right. Thank you so much, Angela. Thank you so much, Sydney, for your time.